Hi guys, welcome back to Christy's Book Corner. I'm your host, Christy Mason, and we're gonna do Inkheart, and we're on chapter 18. Alright, 18. Treasure Island. And so Maggie heard her father read aloud, for the first time in 9 years, in a drafty old church. Even many, many years later, the smell of burnt paper would come back to her as soon as she opened one of the books from which she had read that awful morning. It was chilly in Capricorn's church. Maggie was to remember that later too. Although the sun must have been hot outside and high in the sky by the time Mo began to read. He simply sat down on the floor where he was legs crossed, one book on his lap and the others beside him. Maggie quickly knelt down close to him before Basta could catch hold of her. "Here, get up these steps, all of you," Capricorn told his men, "and take the woman with you. Flatnose only Basta says where he is." Eleanor resisted, but Flatnose merely seized a handful of her hair and hauled her along after him. Capricorn's men climbed the steps and sat at their master's feet, Eleanor among them like a pigeon with ruffled feathers in the middle of the mob of murdering crows. The only person who looked equally out of the place was the thin reader, Darius, who was sitting at the very end of the row, a black-clad man, and kept fiddling with his glasses. Mo opened the book on his lap and began leafing through it, following as if searching the pages for the gold he was reading out of it for Capricorn. "Cockerel, you will cut out the tongue of anyone who utters the silent sound while Silvertongue is reading," said Capricorn, and Cockerel drew a knife from his belt and looked along the row of men as if already selecting his first victim. All was so deathly quiet inside the red church that Maggie thought she could hear Basta breathing behind her, but perhaps it was only the sound of her own fear. Judging by their faces, Capricorn's men seemed to be feeling far from happy. They were looking at Mo with expressions of appreciation mingled with dislike. Maggie understood that only too well. Perhaps one of the men would soon vanish into the book through which Mo was leafing so decidedly. Had Capricorn told them that such a thing might happen? Did even he know it? What if she herself vanished, as Mo obviously feared? Or Eleanor? "Maggie," Mo whispered to her, as if he had heard her thoughts, "hold on to me tight any way you can." Maggie nodded and clenched his sweater, as if that would be any use. "Yes, I think I've found the right place," said Mo. In the silence, he cast a last glance at Capricorn, looked at Eleanor, cleared his throat, and began to read. Eleanor disappeared the red walls of the church, the faces of Capricorn's men, Capricorn himself sitting in his chair. There was nothing but Mo's voice and the pictures forming in their minds when the letters on the page, like the pattern of the carpet, taking shape on the loom. If Maggie could have hated Capricorn any more, she would have done so now. It was his fault that Mo had never once read aloud to her in all these years. To think of the magic he could have worked in her room with his voice, a voice that gave a different flavor, where every word made every sentence a melody. Even Cockerel had forgotten his knife and the tongues he was supposed to cut out, and was listening with a faraway expression on his face. Flatnose was staring into space, enraptured, as if a pirate ship with all sails set through, truly cruising through all the church's windows. The other men were equally entranced. This was not a sound to be heard by Moe's voice, bringing the letters and words onto the page to life. Only one member of his audience seemed immune to the magic of it. Face expressionless, pale eyes fixed on Moe, Capricorn sat there waiting for the clink of coins amidst the harmony of the words. The chests of damp would heavily with gold and silver. Moe did not keep him waiting long. It happened as he was reading, when Jim Hawkins, a boy not much older than Maggie, when he embarked on his terrifying adventure, saw in a dark cave George's and Louise's doubloons and double guineas, and the pictures of all the kings of Europe for the last 100 years. Strange oriental pieces stamped with what looks like whispers of strange on bits of spiders' webs, with round pieces and square pieces, and pieces bored through the middle, as if to wear them round your neck. Nearly every variety of money in the world most, I think, have found a place in that collection, and for a number, I am sure they were like autumn leaves, so that my back ached while stooping in my fingers with sorting them out. The maidservants were cleaning the last crumbs of the tables with coins. Suddenly came rolling over the barred wood. The woman stumbled back, dropping their wipes cloths and pressing their hands into their mouths as the coins traveled and leaped around their feet. Gold, silver, and copper coins jingled over the flat flagstone floor, clinging as they gathered in heaps under the benches. More and more of them seemed rolled as far as the steps. Capricorn's men came to life, bent to pick up the glittering little things bouncing off their boots, but then snatched back their hands. Then none of them dared touch the magic money, for what else could it be? Gold, maybe a paper of printed inks, and the sound of human voice? When the shower of gold stopped, at the very moment Moe closed the book, Maggie saw there was a little sand among all the gleaming, glittering money. A few iridescent blue beetles scuttled away, and the head of an emerald green lizard emerged from a heap of tiny coins. It stared around with fixed eyes, tongue flicking out of its sharp little mouth. Vasta threw his knife at it, as if he could square not just the lizard, but the cowardice that had seized them all. However, Maggie gave a warning cry, and the lizard darted away so fast that the tip of the blade struck the stones. Vasta ran over to his knife, picked it up, and pointed threatening in Maggie's direction. Capricorn rose from his chair, his face still as cold and blank as if nothing worth getting excited about had happened, and clapped his ringed hands graciously. "Not bad for a start, Silvertongue," he said. "See that, Darius? That's what a gold looks like. Not the rusty dental metal you've read out of books for me, but now you've heard how the thing is done, I hope you have learned from it, just in case I ever require your services again." Darius did not reply. His eyes were fixed on Moe with such admiration, and then that it would have surprised Maggie had he flung himself at her father's feet. When Moe straightened up, Darius approached him hesitantly. Capricorn's men were still gazed at the gold as if they didn't know what to do next. "What are you standing there for, gaping like a lot of sheep?" cried Capricorn. "Pick it up. Go on." "That was wonderful," Darius whispered to Moe. while Capricorn's men cautiously began shoveling the coins into bags and boxes. His eyes were gleaming behind his glasses like the eyes of a child who has just been given a much-wanted present. "I've read the books myself," he said in a voice that shook, "but I never saw it all as vivid as I did today. And I didn't just see it, I smelt it. The salt, the tar, and the musty odor of the whole accursed island, Treasure Island. Heavens above, I was petrified." Eleanor approached him behind Darius, pushing him impatiently aside. Flatnose had obviously forgotten her for the moment. "He'll be here any moment. That's what I kept thinking. Long John Silver will be here, lashing out at us with his crutch." Mo just nodded, but Maggie could see the relief on his face. "Here, take it," he told Darius, handing him the book. "I hope I never have to read out loud again. One shouldn't push one's luck. You and his name not quite right every time," Maggie whispered. Mo tentatively stroked the bridge of her nose. "Oh, so you noticed," he whispered back. "Yes, I thought that might help. Perhaps the savage old pirate won't feel very calling to him that I told myself, and he'll stay where he belongs. Why are you looking at me like that?" "Why do you think?" said Eleanor, answering instead of Maggie. Why is she looking so admiring at her father? "Because no one ever read aloud like that. Even apart from the money, I saw it all. The sea, the island, as clear as if I could touch it. And I don't expect it was any different from your daughter." Mo had to smile. He kicked aside a few of the coins on the floor in front of him. One of Capricorn's men picked them up and surreptitiously pocketed them. As he did so, he looked at Mo as uneasily as if he feared a word from him might turn him into a frog, or one of the beetles still crawling around among the coins. "They're afraid of you, Mo," whispered Maggie. She could see the distrust even on Basta's face, although he was doing his best to hide it by assuming a particular bored expression. Only Capricorn seemed to be left cold by what had happened. Arms folded, he stood there watching his men pick up the last of the coins. "How much longer is this going to take?" he asked finally. "Leave the small change where it is and sit down again. And you, Silvertongue, open the next book." "The next book?" Eleanor's voice almost cracked with indulgence. "What on earth's the idea of that? The gold your men are shoveling up there is enough to last you at least 2 lifetimes. We're going home now." She was about to turn around, but Flatnose, who had finally remembered he was meant to be guarding Eleanor, seized her arm roughly. Mo looked up at Capricorn. Basta, smiling unpleasantly, laid his hand on Maggie's shoulder. "Get on with it, Silvertongue," he said. "You've heard there are still plenty of books here." Mo looked at Maggie for a long time before bending to pick up the book he had chosen first, Tale from the Thousands and One Nights. "The book that goes on forever," he murmured. "Open it. Did you know that Arabs say no one can read it right through the end, Maggie?" She shook her head as she sat down beside him on the cold, flat flagstones Basta led her. But he planted himself right behind her. Maggie didn't know much about the Thousand and One Nights, except that it was really a book in many volumes. The copy that Darius had given Mo could only be a small selection, where Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves in it, and Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp. Ali Baba. Which story would Mo read? Maggie thought she was contradictory feeling on the face of Capricorn's men in fear of what Mo might bring to life. Almost done. At the same time, I wish I yearned yearning almost to once more be carried away by his voice, transported far away to a place when they could forever forgot everything, even themselves. There was no smell of salt and rum when Mo began reading this time. The air in Capricorn's church grew but hot. Maggie's eyes began to burn, and when she rubbed them, she found sand sticking to her knuckles. Once again, Capricorn's men listened to Mo's voice, with bated breath, as if they were turned to stone. Capricorn all along seemed to feel nothing of this magic, but its eyes showed that even he was spellbound. They were fixed on Mo's face, as unmoving as the eyes of a snake. His red suit made his pupils look even more washed out, and his body seemed tense, like a dog sensing its prey. But this time Mo disappointed him. The words offered up no riches, none of the treasure chests, pearls, and swords set with precarious stones that Mo's voice conjured up, shining and sparkling, until Capricorn's men felt as if they could pluck them from the air. Something else slipped out of the pages, though something breathing, a creature made of flesh and blood. A boy was suddenly standing between the still smoldering braziers with Capricorn had burned the books. Maggie was the only one to notice him. All the others were too absorbed in the story. Even Mo didn't see him, far away as he was, somewhere in the sand and the wind as his eyes made their way through the labyrinth of letters. The boy was some 3 or 4 years older than Maggie. The turban around his head was dirty, his eyes dark in fear, his brown face. He blinked and rubbed them as if he could wipe it all away. The wrong picture, the wrong place. He looked around the church as if he had never seen such a building before, and how could he have? There wouldn't be any churches with spires in his story, or green hills like those he would see outside. The robe he wore went down to his brown feet. In the dim light of the church it shone blue as a patch of the sky. Maggie wondered, what will happen when they see him? He's certainly not what Capricorn was hoping for, but Capricorn had already noticed the boy. "Stop!" he commanded, so sharply that Mo broke off in mid-sentence and raised his head. Abruptly, and rather unwillingly, Capricorn's men returned to reality. Cockerel was the first on his feet. "Hey, where did he come from?" he growled. The boy ducked, looked around with a terrified expression, and ran up for it, doubling back and forth like a rabbit. But he didn't get far. 3 men immediately sprang forward and caught him to the feet of Capricorn's statue. Mo put the book down on the flat nose beside him, and buried his face in his hands. "Hey, Fluvio's gone!" cried one of the Capricorn's men. "Vanished from thin air." They all stared at Mo. There it was again, the nervousness in their voices, but this time mingled not with admiration but the anger. "Get rid of the boy, Silvertongue," ordered Capricorn angrily. "I have more than enough of his kind, and bring Fluvio back." Mo took his hands away from his face and stood up. "For the millionth time, I can't bring anyone back," he said. "The fact that you don't believe me doesn't make that a lie. I can't do it. I can't decide who or what comes out of a book, nor goes into one." Maggie reached for Mo's hand. Some of Capricorn's men came closer to 2 of them, holding the boy. They were pulling on his arm as if to tear him in half. Eyes wide with terror, the boy stares into the unfamiliar faces. Back to your places, Capricorn ordered the angry men. A couple of them were already dangerously close to Mo. Why all this fuss? Have you forgotten how stupidly Fluvio acted on the last job? He almost had the police down on us, so it's the right man to have gone. And who knows, perhaps this lad will turn out to have a talent for arson. All the same, I want to see pearls now, and gold and jewels. After all, they're what this story is all about, so let's have some. An uneasily murmured rose among the men. Nonetheless, most of them returned to the steps and perched once more on the worn treads. Only three still stood in the front of Mo, staring at him with intense hostility. One of them was Basta. "Farewell, so we can dispense with Flavio," he said, never taking his eyes off Mo. "But who's this wretched wizard going to magic into thin air next time? I don't want to end up in some dicey, accursed dessert story, and find myself going around in a turban all of a sudden." The men stand near him, nodding in agreement, and looked at Mo so darkly that Maggie almost stopped breathing. "Basta, I won't tell you again." Capricorn's voice sounded menacingly calm. "Let him go on reading, all of you. And anyone whose teeth start chattering with fear had better go outside and help the woman with the laundry." Some of the men looked longingly at the church door, but none ventured to leave. Finally, even the two who had been standing beside Basta turned without a word and sat down with the others. "You'll pay for Flavio yet," Basta whispered to Mo before he resignated himself behind Maggie again. Why couldn't he have disappeared, she thought. The boy still hadn't uttered a sound. "Look at him. We'll see if he can be of any use to us later," ordered Capricorn. The boy did not resist as Flatnose led him away. Apparently numb, he stumbled along as if he were still expecting to wake up. When would he realize this dream was never going to end? When the door closed behind the two of them, Capricorn returned to his chair. "Go on reading, Silvertongue," he said. "We still have a long day ahead of us." But Mo looked at the books lying at his feet and shook his head. "No," he said. "You saw. It happened again. I'm tired being content with what I've brought you from Treasure Island. Those coins are worth a fortune. I want to go home, and I never want to set eyes on you again." His voice sounded rougher than usual, as if I had read too many words aloud. Capricorn looked at Mo, uprising before turning his eyes to the bag and chest his men had fed with coins. He seemed to be working out how long their contents and keep him in comfort. "Yes, you're right," he said at last. "We'll go on tomorrow. Otherwise, we might find a stinking camel turning up here next, or another half-starved boy. Tomorrow." Mo took a step toward him. "What do you mean? Aren't you satisfied yet? One of your men has disappeared already. Do you want to be the next?" "I can live with the risk," replied Capricorn, unimpressed. His men leaped to their feet as he rose from his chair and walked slowly down the altar steps. They stood there like schoolboys, although some of them were taller than Maggie, hands clasped behind their backs as if at any moment he might inspect their fingernails for cleanliness. Maggie couldn't help remembering what Basta had said, how young he himself had been when he had joined Capricorn, and she wondered whether it was out of fear or admiration that the men bowed their heads. Capricorn had stopped beside one of the bulging money bags. "Oh, I have a great plan for you, Silvertongue, believe me," he said, putting his hands into the sack and running the coins through his fingers. "Today it was just a test, after all. I had to convince myself of your talent with my own eyes and ears, right? I can certainly use all this gold. By the tomorrow, you're going to read something else out of a book for me. He strolled over to the boxes that had contained the books that were now burnt to ashes and reached into one. Surprise! He announced, smiling as he held up a single book. It didn't look at all like the copy Maggie and Eleanor had brought him. It still had a brightly colored paper dust jacket with a picture that Maggie couldn't make out from a distance. "Oh yes, I still have one," remarked Capricorn, scanning the uncomprehending faces with pleasure. "My own personal copy. You might say, and tomorrow, Silvertongue, you're going to read to me from it. As I was saying, I like this world of yours very much indeed, but there's a friend from the old days that I miss. I never let your substitute try this skill with my friend. I was afraid he might bring him here without a head, or with only a leg, but now I have you, and you're a master of your art." Mo was staring incredulously at the book in Capricorn's hand, as if expected it to dissolve into thin air at any moment. "Have a rest, Silvertongue," said Capricorn. "Spare your previous voice. We'll have plenty of time for that because I have to go away. I won't be back till noon tomorrow. Take these three back to their quarters," he told his men. "Give them enough to eat and some blankets for the night. Oh yes, and get Mortarella to bring him tea. The kind of thing works wonders on a horse tired voice. Didn't you always swear by tea sweetened with honey, Darius?" He turned inquiringly to his old reader, who simply nodded and looked sympathetically at Mo. "Back to our quarters? Do you mean the hole where your man with the knife put us last night?" Eleanor's cheeks were flushed red, whether in horror or indulgence, Maggie couldn't guess. "This is a wrongful detention. No worse, abduction. That's an abduction. Are you aware how many years jail you'll get for it? Abduction?" Basta severed the word. "Sounds good to me, really good." Capricorn gave him a smile. Then he looked at Eleanor and down as if he were seeing for the first time. "Basta," he said, "is this lady of any use to us?" "No, not that I know of," replied Basta, smiling like a child who was just given permission to smash a toy. Eleanor went pale and tried to step backward, but Cockrell barreled her way and held her firmly. "What do we generally do with useless things, Basta?" asked Capricorn quietly. Basta went on smiling. "Stop that," Mo said angrily to Capricorn. "Stop fighting her at once, or I might read you another word. With very apprentice of indifference, Capricorn turned his back to him, and Basta kept smiling. Maggie saw Eleanor press a hand to her trembling lips, and quickly went over to stand beside her. "She's not useless. She knows more about books than anyone else in the world," she said, holding Eleanor's other hand very tightly. Capricorn turned around. The look in his eyes made Maggie shudder, as if someone were running cold fingers down her spine. His eyelashes were as pale as cobwebs. "Eleanor definitely knows more stories with treasure in them than that spineless reader of yours," Maggie stammered. "Definitely." Eleanor squeezed Maggie's fingers hard. Her own hand was damp with sweat. "Yes, absolutely. That's true," she said huskily. "I'm sure I can think of several more." "Well, well," was all Capricorn said, his curved lips tracing a smile. "We'll see." Then he gave his men a signal, and they made Eleanor, Maggie, and Mo file past the tables, past Capricorn's statue and the red columns, and then out the heavy door that groaned as they pushed it. Outside, beyond the shadow of the church on the village square, the sun shone down from a cloudless blue sky, and the air was filled with scents of summer. It was as if nothing unusual had happened. That's the end of chapter 18. That's a long chapter. Stay tuned for chapter 19. And that will be the next chapter, the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, comment, and like. And make sure to hit the notifications bell to be notified when I upload another video. And don't forget to dare to dream, guys. Bye.